Hi everybody, welcome to Right to the Top. I'm Adam. Today I'm starting my first little mini-series on the preparations for the IELTS or TOEFL exam. The purpose of these series is to take you from day one to day pass, the day you pass your test and go on to do whatever you need to do with your test scores. Of course, you're going to be learning how to write. You're going to be learning how to write for an exam. But again, even if you're not taking the IELTS or TOEFL, there's lots to learn on the way to learning how to improve your writing skills, okay? But we're going to start today with test preparation, and we're going to look at the first steps. Now, for a lot of people, the first step comes on the day that they realize that they actually need to take a test, that they need an English examination to get into university or college or whatever school they're applying to, or for immigration purposes. If you're going to Canada, if you're going to Australia, you can take the IELTS or you can take the TOEFL or you can take other tests to prove that you have enough English ability to live in these countries. And all of these tests have a writing section, and it's very important to know how to do that, which is why I set up this channel. But also I want to just talk to you today generally about these tests. So today we're going to answer this question. IELTS versus TOEFL, which test should you take? For a lot of people, this is a very difficult question. You have options. You don't know what the difference between the two tests are, so that's what I'm going to look at today. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail. I'm going to look at the structures of, and the sections of the two tests, and I'm going to look specifically at the pros and cons for you, okay? There's going to be pros and cons, but they're going to be a little bit different for everybody. What's good about one test, what's bad about a test, and vice versa. And then I'm going to talk to you about how you should start preparing for these tests, okay? So there's quite a bit of information, but it's all good for you. At the end, you need to make a very informed decision about which test to take. So we're going to look at the two tests, okay? So we're going to look at the IELTS. IELTS is a pen and paper test. It means everything's by pen or pencil. It's all paper, it's all on your table, there's no screen, okay? All handwritten. If you have bad handwriting, a bit of a problem, you should start working on cleaning that up. On the other hand, we have TOEFL, which is a computer test. It's online based, that's why it's called the IBT, internet-based test. But again, you're doing it on a computer. Everything's with a typewriter, it's all typed, okay? If you don't have good computer skills or typing skills, start practicing these as well now. The IELTS has 4 standalone skills, means you have a listening section, a reading section, a writing section, and a speaking section. Each skill is tested individually. With the TOEFL, you have all 4 skills, you have the 4 sections, but the writing and the speaking sections are integrated. What does this mean? It means that you're doing more than one skill. For example, in the speaking, you may have to read a short passage, and then listen to a short dialogue, and then speak your answer. So you're using 3 skills. In the writing, you're going to read a passage, you're going to listen to a lecture, and then you're going to write a summary of how the two work together. So that's why they're integrated. Some people think this is more difficult, some people think this is easier. That's really up to you. Now, the timing. And I'm going to talk more details about what's good and bad about these things in the pros and cons section. The IELTS takes about 3 hours. You have your listening, reading, and writing portion of the test, which is on the paper. It takes about 2 hours, 40 minutes on the paper. And then you have a 12 to 15 minute speaking test with a human interviewer. Now, the problem is there are so many people taking the test at one time and not enough graders that some of you will take the speaking test on the same day as the paper test. Some of you will do it the day before, some of you will do it the day after. I've even heard of people doing it a week later. So you do your paper test one Friday, you do your speaking test the following Friday. So a big difference between the two. So it could be a little bit spread out. The TOEFL could be anywhere from 3 hours and 10 minutes, or if you're a bit unlucky, it could be 4 hours and 20 minutes, and I'll talk more about that. But you sit down, you start, you finish, you're done. You go home, you don't think about it again. So very different timings, and I'll talk more about the TOEFL timing in a minute. Listening. So IELTS, you have 4 sections. You have dialogues and speeches. So you have two speakers, one speaker, two speakers, one speaker. Very easy to understand the structure. TOEFL, you're a little bit all over the place. You have dialogues, you have speeches, you have lectures. They're a little bit mixed up. 60 to 90 minutes. You could have extra questions. You could have fewer questions. IELTS, you're going to have 40 questions every time. TOEFL, maybe 34, maybe 51. Now, the main difference between the two tests, with IELTS, you have cues. You have your questions and you have fill in the blanks. You have hints, I guess you could say, on the paper. There's something to look at and something to follow as you're listening. With TOEFL, there's nothing. There's a picture on a screen and nothing else. So you need to listen and you need to take notes as you're listening so that you can remember the information when the questions do come after. So there's no help, there's no clues when you're answering the questions. So I think that makes IELTS a little bit easier in terms of the listening. Now, in IELTS, because you're doing handwriting and because the types of questions you're going to get in TOEFL, it's all multiple choice and arranging. There's no writing in TOEFL. In IELTS listening, you're writing answers. Sometimes it's words, but sometimes it's multiple choice, A, B, C, D, but sometimes it's actual words. Spelling counts on the IELTS. If you heard the right answer, but the way you spelled the word on the answer sheet is incorrect, you don't get that point. This also counts for punctuation. If you missed a capital letter, you don't get the point. If you missed a hyphen, you don't get the point. So it's very important that your spelling and your understanding of punctuation is very strong. And again, in TOEFL, there's no writing, so it's not an issue. Spelling does count in your writing section, of course, in your task 1 and task 2, like the essay. Spelling is part of the writing, but it's not part of the rest of the test. Listening, it's real world and academic, the listening section. So you're going to have some things from parts 1 and 2 are just everyday real life things that you might experience outside of school. And there's also academic. Parts 3 and 4 are generally academic. TOEFL is all in an academic setting. You have classroom listening sections, and you have campus, like around the school listening section. So it's formal and informal academic situations. Okay. Reading, both of them have at least 3 passages. Again, TOEFL might have an extra passage for some people, so it's 60 to 80 minutes, 3 to 4 passages. Both of them have a very high level of vocabulary, so start building your vocabulary today, right now, okay? There's some good words in here I hope that you guys can use. A variety of question types and topics, a variety of question types and topics for the TOEFL, but the difference is that the IELTS has a little bit more range. They go outside of the academics. There's history, there's humanities, there's arts and sports sometimes. TOEFL also has these things, but they're all generally very academic. It's a very academic style of writing, which I find a little bit more boring, personally. I like the IELTS readings better. But again, it's a matter of preference. Some people like academic writing. TOEFL, I find, has more scientific style writing. Some people like it, some people don't. I'm not a science guy, so I don't like the scientific readings. IELTS also has scientific passages, but I find there are fewer of those on IELTS. Now, the IELTS reading, again, you're doing it on paper, so you can go back and forth, and you can mark up your answer sheet and your reading sheet. So as you're reading, you can underline things that you think are important, you can take notes. They will take your answer sheet later, but you can write whatever you want. TOEFL, because it's on screen, obviously you're not writing anything there, you will have scrap paper on the side that you can take notes, but you can't underline, you can't do these sorts of things, and you're scrolling up and down. IELTS, you're flipping back and forth with the paper. TOEFL, you're scrolling up and down. Some people are more comfortable with one, some people are more comfortable with the other, okay? Writing. Both of them have 2 tasks. In IELTS, you have an infographic, you have a pie chart or a bar graph or a diagram of a process, for example, and you have to write 150 words or more, and you have 20 minutes. And for the general test, for the people who are trying to immigrate or to emigrate to Canada or Australia, for example, and you need just a general test, Then you have to write a letter. Formal, informal, in between. You have an essay. You're given a prompt. You have to write a 4 to 5 paragraph essay, 250 words minimum or more, 40 minutes. The TOEFL essay is also 4 or 5 paragraphs that you have to write, 300 words or more, but you have 10 minutes fewer. 30 minutes to write your essay, 40 minutes for the IELTS. On paper, so handwriting, typed. If you're a fast typist, TOEFL is easy. If you have very messy handwriting, this might be a problem for you with the writing section. If the grader can't read what you wrote, they'll just skip it and you're losing points. You have to have neat handwriting. And the TOEFL task 1, you're going to read a passage. It's going to be about a certain topic. It's going to be an academic reading. Then you're going to listen to a lecture about the same topic. And usually the lecture is contradicting the reading. Sometimes it's supporting it. You have to write a summary. How does it contradict? How does it support? For the IELTS, you have 2 humans who will grade your essay. 2 people will read it and give you a score. And the TOEFL, you have 1 person reading and 1 software program. Now, why is this a big difference? Because for the TOEFL, if you write more, it'll help a little bit with the points. Again, we'll talk about the good and bad of that as well, okay? But either way, practice your writing. Start working on your writing today. IELTS speaking. Now, this is a big difference. It's a little bit shorter, 12 to 14 minutes. You have a range of questions. We'll talk about that at a different time. 3 parts. You have first part is just like everyday topics. They're going to ask you about bicycles or movies or restaurants. Then you have a little monologue. They'll give you a card with a topic. You have to speak about this topic for 1 to 2 minutes by yourself. And then you have your third part is interviews, a little bit deeper questions, a little bit more opinions, arguments, etc. And you're doing this with a human being. There's you and a person sitting in front of you and you're having a conversation. With TOEFL, it's a little bit longer, 20 minutes, but there's no person, there's more prep time. So you'll be given 6 questions. You will be given the question. You will be given a short time to prepare and then a short time to speak. Everything is timed. So you have 30 seconds to prepare your answer and then you have to speak for 60 seconds from beep to beep, okay? And you're gonna have 6 parts, so 2, 2, and 2. And you're also going to have integrated, which means you can have a reading section, a listening, and then speaking, or just a listening and a speaking, okay? And you're speaking into a microphone, and you're looking at a timer. That's it. You're you and the computer, nobody else. So those are the main structural differences. Now, let's look at some pros and cons of these 2 tests. With the IELTS, everybody is writing the same format of test, which means everybody's doing the listening section at the same time. Everybody's doing the reading section at the same time. Maybe not the same reading passages, but everybody has the same hour of reading. Everybody has the same hour of writing. Maybe different questions, but everybody's quietly writing for that 1 hour. With TOEFL, very different. Everybody has a different test. Some people will have a longer listening section. Some people will have a longer reading section, which means that everybody's doing a different section at different times. So where this becomes a problem is that if you have a room full of people taking the test and everybody's doing a different section, it gets very noisy. So if you're trying to do the listening section and the person right beside you is doing the writing and they're typing really hard on their typewriter, very difficult for you to concentrate on your listening while that person is typing. Or the person next to you is doing their speaking section while you're doing your listening section or reading section or whatever. So you take that into consideration. Bring earplugs, okay? Bring earplugs to your TOEFL test. Very, very important that you do that. Now, I've also heard a lot of horror stories about TOEFL centers where the equipment is very old. The headphones don't work well. The keyboards are like the old clunky type that make a lot of noise when you're typing. Go check your test center before that and make some preparations. The IELTS, again, is a little bit shorter. Now, TOEFL has experimental questions. Now, I told you it's 3 hours and 10 minutes to 4 hours and 20. Some people will have a shorter test. Some people will be given experimental sections. means that they're testing future questions on you. These questions don't count towards your score. So in the reading section, you can have 3 or 4 sections, 3 or 4. Only 3 will be counted, will be scored. The other one, the 4th one, is just going for research for future tests. So, but you don't know which is the experimental and which is the scored section. So you have to concentrate on all 4. It's a little bit unfair, and they do the same thing with the listening. You could have an extra listening. If you're unlucky, you'll have an extra listening and an extra reading, and somebody else will have neither. It's a little bit unfair, but that's how they do it, okay? So you have to be prepared for that. IELTS, you know you're getting this many questions in this much time, and that's it. So IELTS, all the sections are standalone. So listening, you're just doing listening. Of course, there's a little bit of reading involved. You have to read the questions and understand them. In the reading, you're just doing reading. In the writing, you're just doing writing. Again, TOEFL, it's integrated. So some people think it's easier to concentrate on one thing alone. Some people like the fact that it's integrated, that their listening is stronger. So because they can listen and understand something, they have a better idea of what's going on, and then they can write better or speak better. It's up to you to decide that. For the IELTS, you don't need any computer skills. I know that in this day and age, almost everybody has them, but you'd be surprised. Some people are just not comfortable with computers. Decide if you are or not. TOEFL, so you need basic computer skills. You need scrolling. You need to know back and forth. You need to know how to type quickly. 30 minutes to type over 300 words, not so easy. As I mentioned, I think the IELTS reading is a little bit more interesting. TOEFL is a bit more academic. Now, here I put it in the middle, human interviewer or speaking to a monitor. For some people, one is a pro, one is a con. For some people, it's the opposite. So let's talk about this for a second. A human interviewer. Some people, they see a person in front of them, especially a foreigner or a native English speaker, and they panic. You know, they get all scared and they're shy and they're nervous. They're not sure about their abilities, and then their score goes down because they didn't even try. They just got panicked, and the whole test went down. Some people are looking at a computer screen and like, there's no reaction, right? You don't see a facial reaction. IELTS, the person may smile at you, may frown at you. That's good and bad also. But a computer screen does nothing. So you have only yourself to trust. And you're seeing that timer, like 60, 59, like the time goes down and you get nervous. Again, decide which makes you least nervous. Does a human interviewer make you more nervous or less nervous? Does a computer make you more nervous with a timer or less nervous? You need to decide, and you need to practice both ways as much as you possibly can so you don't get nervous. IELTS, for the writing, you have 10 more minutes to write your essay. And TOEFL, you have 10 minutes fewer. You have 30 minutes, and you have to write more. So it's a little bit difficult. Now, for the IELTS, you can get practice tests all over the place, and I'm going to talk to you about that a bit more later. You can get practice tests because they're on paper. Of course, TOEFL, there's tons of books, there's tons of practice tests, but you want to get practice tests on a computer. You want to practice doing it on a computer, not on paper. So there are a lot of these as well, but they're a little bit more expensive because you have to buy a CD and you have to do it on a computer, so keep that in mind. As far as the cost of each test, different countries have different prices. Generally, the IELTS is a bit more expensive, so that's up to you. Go to the IELTS and the ETS websites, go to the official websites of the tests and find out how much it costs in your area and all the fees involved. You're going to have to take a picture and all this stuff, what IDs, etc. Now, a few more. IELTS. IELTS has over 1,200 test centers globally. TOEFL has over 4,500. So obviously it's much easier to find a TOEFL test center than it is an IELTS test center. But keep in mind this is changing. IELTS is becoming more and more and more popular. TOEFL is becoming steady, a little bit declining. They're starting to balance out. TOEFL used to have a monopoly. Now IELTS is becoming more and more popular. And I think a lot of you take the TOEFL because you want to go to an American school. Just so you understand, more and more American schools are taking the IELTS now as well. All the top schools in the US take the IELTS as well, so it's up to you to decide which you want. The problem with IELTS, you may have to travel to go to a test center. Like you may have to go to a different city in the country you're in to find a test center. Again, IELTS, if your handwriting is messy, it's a problem. TOEFL, there's no writing. Spelling counts. On the TOEFL, when you're doing your essay or you're doing your writing section, just remember, you're on a computer, but there's no spell checker. It's not like your computer at home, we have a red line under a misspelled word. If you make a mistake in spelling, it'll hurt your score. You won't know it, it won't tell you. The speaking test in the IELTS is could be on a separate day. It's definitely a separate time. So some people, they get very nervous. So for example, if your speaking test is the Friday and your paper test is the next day on the Saturday, you may have done a bit badly on the speaking test and lost all your confidence, and then you'll go do badly on your paper test the next day. Or you do the paper test on the first, and then you get a little bit nervous. Oh, how did I do? How did I do? And then you take that nervousness with you into the test room, and you're more nervous in front of the interviewer, and your score goes down. You have to make sure you adjust for that separation of the two parts of the test. TOEFL, you go in, you write it, you finish, you move on, okay? Now, with all that in mind, a few things to keep before you start actually preparing. These are the first steps, the baby steps. Visit both tests' official websites. I put it in the YouTube description box, I put links to ETS. ETS is the owner of TOEFL, and to the British Council, which owns the IELTS, okay? Go to the official sites, get all the information you can, find out costs, test centers, dates, what you need to do, what you don't need to do, etc. Make sure you get all the information that you need. Then, choose the one test you want to do. I've heard of some people, they try to do both. Don't do that. They're very different tests in terms of how you prepare. Choose one and focus on it and do it well, okay? Get study books. Don't only do practice tests. Make sure that you understand what you need to work on in terms of your weaknesses and get the books to help you prepare. Now, if you're a fluent English speaker or even a native English speaker and for some reason you need to take this test, get a book. Get at least a practice test to see how the test works. What's the outline, what's the structures, what are the directions. Just because you know English doesn't mean that you can go in and get a 9 on the IELTS or 120 on the TOEFL. You can't. If you don't know what's coming, these are difficult tests. Make sure you understand how the test works. Next, take a practice test, a full practice test as much as possible in real test conditions, which means close yourself in a room, make sure nobody interrupts you, make sure your phone is off and outside the room. Don't bring your phone inside the room. Everything is off. Take a full practice test. If you can do the speaking, great. If you can't, worry about that later, but make sure you do the writing section. And identify your weak areas. If you're weak in grammar, start studying grammar. If you're weak in vocab, start building your vocab. If your writing is weak, start working on your writing, okay? Know your weaknesses, work on them first. Get to know the test inside out. So as I mentioned before for the native speakers, know all the directions, know all the question types, all the different timings, all the skill sets you're gonna need, like vocab, grammar, writing, etc. Make sure that you know all this stuff before test day so you don't waste your time during the test trying to figure out what to do or what's being asked of you. And then start working on your skills. And I'm going to make videos to help you start doing these as well. Start building your vocab. Vocab is the most important thing you need to start doing right away. Improve your reading skills. Read every day, every day, every day, a lot, as much as you can. Build your speed, build your vocab, build your grammar. Study writing samples. Make sure you know what they're expecting. And study high-end writing samples. Don't study 6-level samples. Study 9-level samples, 30-level samples. Review the grammar that you're weak with and all these other things. Make sure you know what you need to do for these tests. And a big tip, from my own personal experience, start working on the writing section first. Most people, they go straight for the listening, they go straight for the reading. Writing takes the longest time to improve. It's the most difficult of the 4 sections. Start working on that right away, okay? And I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna make another video to explain to you why and how to do that, okay? So there you go. First step, choose the test, start getting ready, know what's coming, start preparing, and get the right books. In the next video, I'll give you my personal recommendations of those books, okay? That's it for today. I hope you got some useful information out of that. If you have any questions, please go to the YouTube comment section and ask me there. If you like the video, please give me a like. Please subscribe to my channel. I'll be making more of these mini courses as we go every Monday. Don't forget, every Wednesday you can get more practical lessons, a little bit shorter lessons. And come back soon for more, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.